When I finally moved back to Montana, I realized that sense of community, you just can't find that anywhere else.
Yeah. Prologue, Denver, January. The storm came in fast from the mountains, the way winter storms always did in Denver. No warning, no mercy, just the sudden erasure of the city under white. By 9 o'clock that Tuesday night, the streets of Capitol Hill were empty. The coffee shops had flipped their signs. The corner grocery had locked its door. The last bus on the 1-5 route had passed 20 minutes ago, and now there was nothing moving on East Colfax except the snow itself, sheeting sideways past the orange glow of the street lamps. Daniel Carter was driving home slowly, both hands on the wheel, his headlights cutting through the dark as he turned off the highway and into the quiet residential blocks near Cherry Creek. In the back seat, his twin daughters were asleep, tucked under a fleece blanket they shared without negotiating the way only very young children and people who love each other completely know how to share things. He almost missed her. She was sitting on the stoop of a closed dry cleaning shop, her back pressed against the locked glass door, her knees pulled up to her chest. She wore a thin denim jacket over a pale yellow blouse. No scarf, no gloves, no shoes. Daniel would think about that later, about how the detail that registered first was not her face, not her tears, not the small canvas bag slumped against her hip. It was her feet, bare against the concrete step, red at the toes, the skin gone wrong with cold. In the back seat, one of his daughters shifted. Then a small hand pressed against the fogged window. Dad. The voice was Emma's always Emma first, always the one who spoke what the other felt. That lady doesn't have any shoes. Daniel slowed the car to a stop. He sat there for a moment, the engine running, the heat blowing softly through the vents. Snow fell in the beam of his headlights. The woman on the stoop hadn't moved. She didn't look up at the car. She was somewhere else entirely, in whatever place a person goes when they've run out of anywhere left to be. He put the SUV in park. Her name was Elena Brooks, and she had been walking for nearly 3 hours. She had left the apartment on Gilpin Street at 6:17 in the evening. She knew the time because she had glanced at the microwave clock as Marcus grabbed her arm and told her to get out, and that specific green readout, 6:17, had burned itself into her memory with the strange precision of shock. She had walked out into the parking lot carrying one canvas bag. Her winter coat was still hanging on the hook inside the door. Her boots were still beside the mat. She had not been allowed to go back for them. Marcus had found the paper in her jacket pocket. The paper from the specialist's office, the one with the letterhead and the careful clinical language, bilateral tubal obstruction, severely diminished ovarian reserve, natural conception, unlikely the paper she had been carrying for 11 days, trying to find the right words, the right moment, the right version of herself that could sit down across from her husband and say this thing. There had been no right moment. There was only the moment he found it. 3 years, he had said, standing in the middle of the kitchen, the paper in his hand. His voice had been very quiet, which was worse somehow than shouting. 3 years of my life. And you knew. I found out 11 days ago, she said. Get out, Marcus. I need my coat. Please let me just. I said, get out of my apartment. It was his apartment. That was the thing Elena had not fully understood until that moment, that in 4 years of marriage, they had lived exclusively in spaces that belonged to him, funded by him, organized around his preferences and his schedule. She had worked as a line cook at Benedetti's Ristorante on Broadway until the restaurant closed 8 months ago, and since then she had been taking occasional catering shifts, supplementing what Marcus earned managing a property portfolio downtown. She had assumed this was temporary. She had assumed a great many things. She walked east on Colfax because it was the direction her feet chose, and because she had nowhere specific to go. She had a cell phone with a cracked screen and 14% battery, and she had called her sister, Noelle, in Phoenix. And Noelle had said she was sorry. She was so sorry, but she was in the middle of something with the kids, and could Elena call back in the morning? And Elena had said yes, of course, and then had not called anyone else because there was no one else. The cold came up through the pavement in waves. She could feel it migrating through the soles of her feet, first the mild discomfort of cold concrete, then the ache, then the deepening numbness that was, she understood dimly, its own kind of warning. She kept walking because stopping felt like surrendering to something, though she was no longer sure what she was fighting or why. By the time she reached the dry cleaning shop, she could not feel her toes at all. She sat down on the step because her legs decided it for her. She pressed her back against the glass door and pulled her knees up and looked at the empty street. And the snow came down around her in silence. She was 27 years old and had never felt more completely alone. Then headlights swept across her, and a dark SUV slowed and stopped, and a door opened, and footsteps came through the snow. Daniel Carter was 39, and he was not, by temperament, an impulsive man. He made decisions carefully, the way his father had taught him to look at the facts, consider the angles, wait until you were sure. He had built a successful structural engineering consultancy on that methodical instinct. And he had managed, through 3.5 years of single parenthood, to maintain a household that ran with a kind of quiet reliability that he believed his daughters needed. Predictable mornings, regular meals, bedtime at 8:30. He was not a person who stopped for strangers in snowstorms. He got out of the car. Behind him, he heard the back door open, Emma, always Emma, and then small footsteps in the snow, and before he could say anything, his daughter had run past him and crouched down in front of the woman on the step. In Emma's hands were her winter gloves, small and violet, with a rubber grip on the palms. "Here," Emma said. She held them out to the woman with the directness of a 6-year-old who had not yet learned to be afraid of generosity. "You can have these. Your hands look really cold." The woman looked at the gloves, then at Emma, and something in her face collapsed, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that things collapse when they have been held together too long by sheer will, and there is suddenly no reason left to keep holding. She started crying, not the kind of crying that asks for anything, the kind that simply cannot stay inside anymore. Daniel stood back and watched his daughter reach out and take the woman's hands, both of them, holding them the way Lily sometimes held his hands when she was frightened, with complete and uncomplicated trust, and something moved through him that he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that had gone quiet after Sophia died and that he had stopped expecting to feel again. He said, "Can you stand?" The woman looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, swollen from cold and crying, her hair matted from the snow. She was probably not much older than 30, he thought, though grief made people hard to age accurately. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I'm fine. I just need a minute." "You've been out here a while," he said. Not an accusation, just the observation of a man who was looking at the color of her feet and doing some quiet calculations about frostbite and body temperature. "My name is Daniel. This is Emma. Can you tell me your name?" A pause. Then, "Elena. Elena." He nodded once. Behind him, the other back door had opened, and Lily stood in the snow with the fleece blanket from the back seat around her shoulders, watching with her serious dark eyes. "Come with me," he said. He didn't frame it as a question, not because he meant to be forceful, but because she needed it to be simple. He had learned, raising 2 children alone, that sometimes a clear sentence is an act of kindness. She came with him. The house was larger than Elena expected, a Georgian colonial on a quiet residential street, brick facade, bay windows lit from within, a covered porch where 2 pairs of children's boots sat beside a doormat. The SUV's tires crunched up the driveway and into the garage, and Elena sat in the passenger seat as the door came down behind them, sealing out the storm, and for a moment the silence was so absolute after the hours of wind that she wasn't sure she could move. Emma had fallen back to sleep against the window. Lily had not slept. She sat in the back and watched Elena with the steady attention of a child who notices everything and says very little. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and something warm. A candle, maybe, or the residue of baking from earlier in the day. A woman came down the hallway, mid-60s, silver hair, a wool cardigan, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She stopped when she saw Elena. "This is Mrs. Patricia Harper," Daniel said. "She helps me with the girls." He looked at Patricia with a quietness that Elena would later understand was a kind of shorthand between them, years of shared improvisation in the service of a household. "Can you get the guest room ready? She'll need warm clothes, probably something from the storage boxes." Patricia's gaze moved over Elena once, assessing, unhurried. Whatever conclusion she reached, she kept it behind her expression. "Of course," she said. "I'll put towels in the bathroom." Daniel carried Emma upstairs. Lily followed, pausing on the second step to look back at Elena. "The bathroom is at the end of the hall," Lily said. Her voice was low and deliberate. Then she turned and went up after her father. Elena stood in the entryway of a stranger's house on a Tuesday night in January with no shoes, no coat, and $11 in a canvas bag, and she did not know what she was supposed to do next. She had grown up in a series of foster placements and group homes in Colorado Springs, and then, in a small apartment, she shared with 2 other line cooks in Capitol Hill, and then, in Marcus's apartment, and in all of those places, she had always known her position provisional, contingent, tolerated. This house felt different in a way she could not immediately explain. She walked down the hall to the bathroom. She stood under the hot water for a very long time. She watched the redness recede from her feet as the warmth came back into them, and the pain that came with the blood returning was sharp and specific, and she was almost grateful for it because it meant she hadn't lost anything permanent. She borrowed the shampoo from the shelf. She wrapped herself in a towel that was thick and white and clearly not purchased with economy in mind. On the counter, Patricia had left a folded stack of clothes, a pair of gray sweatpants, a soft flannel shirt, thick wool socks. Elena put them on and sat down on the edge of the tub. She had not cried yet. Not really. She had leaked in front of Emma outside, but that was different. That was the body's automatic response to unexpected kindness, not grief. The grief was still somewhere further in, lodged behind her sternum like a stone she hadn't figured out how to move. She sat on the edge of the tub in borrowed clothes in a stranger's house and breathed slowly until she felt she could stand again. She slept 12 hours, which she had never done in her adult life. When she woke, pale January light was pressing through the curtains, and the house was already making its morning sounds. Feet on the stairs, the distant percussion of a cabinet closing, the specific, bright commentary of a child explaining something at length to no one in particular. Elena lay still for a moment and tried to locate herself in time. Then she got up. In the kitchen, Emma was sitting at the breakfast bar in her school uniform, a bowl of cereal in front of her, conducting a full-volume monologue about the superior intelligence of dolphins. Lily sat beside her, eating toast, not appearing to listen but clearly retaining everything. They both looked up when Elena came in. "You're awake," Emma announced. "Dad says you're staying. I said you could have my extra dolphin poster. Lily said that was weird, but I think it's welcoming." Lily, without looking up from her toast, "I said it was unusual, not weird." "Same thing." "It's not." Elena stood in the doorway and watched them and felt something she didn't have an immediate word for, a warmth that was also a kind of ache, the specific tenderness of seeing something you had been told you could not have. "Good morning," she said. Emma launched immediately into questions. Her name, her age, whether she could cook, whether she liked dogs, whether she knew that dolphins sleep with one eye open. Elena answered everything honestly, including the dolphin fact, which she did not know. Lily finished her toast and pushed back from the counter. She disappeared down the hall and returned 2 minutes later holding a sheet of construction paper. She placed it on the breakfast bar in front of Elena without ceremony, as if delivering a report. Elena looked at it. A house drawn in crayon brick red walls, yellow windows, a door in the center, snow falling in uneven white lines. And in front of the door, a figure with long, dark hair, standing on the step. Below the figure, in careful block letters that still had the uneven sizing of a child learning to write. Welcome. Helena had to press her lips together for a moment. Did you draw this last night? She asked. Lily nodded. Thank you, Lily. Lily shrugged with one shoulder, the gesture of someone who does not want to make too much of the things they feel. She climbed back onto her stool and picked up her glass of orange juice. In 27 years, in every home she had ever occupied, no one had drawn her a welcome. Daniel came home early from the office that afternoon. He found Elena in the kitchen, having produced, with the ingredients she'd found in the refrigerator and the pantry, a pot of minestrone that had been simmering for 40 minutes and a loaf of brown bread that was still warm from the oven. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment. Then he said, "You didn't have to do this. I needed something to do." She turned off the burner. And I found the bread flour. He sat down at the kitchen table. She sat across from him. He had a yellow legal pad in front of him, which she thought was either charming or alarming, and she wasn't sure yet which. He said, "I want to talk to you about a practical matter. I realize the timing is unusual. Okay, I've been looking for a full-time cook for about 6 months. Someone to manage the household meals, school lunches, the occasional dinner if I have people over for work. I had an agency candidate last fall. She lasted 3 weeks before she moved to Portland. Before that, I had a service that dropped off prepared meals, but the girls didn't eat most of it." He paused. "Patricia is wonderful, but cooking is not her strength, and she has her own household to manage." Elena looked at him. "I looked up your work history this morning. I hope that's not presumptuous, and I found your name in a review from 2021 from a woman who ate at Benedetti's and specifically mentioned the lamb pasta as the best thing she'd had in Denver." He pushed the legal pad toward her. "This is what I'm thinking, in terms of arrangement." She looked at the pad. He had written out a daily meal schedule, a monthly salary figure, a room and board notation. The handwriting was neat and slightly cramped, the handwriting of someone who had taken engineering drawing classes. The salary was more than she had earned at Benedetti's. She looked up. "You don't know anything about me. I know Emma gave you her gloves and you didn't drop them in the snow when you stood up. I know you made minestrone from scratch in an unfamiliar kitchen while my daughters were at school, which suggests both competence and a need to be useful." He folded his hands on the table. "And I know that you're in a difficult situation that is not of your making, and that you need somewhere to be while you figure out the next thing. I'm offering that. Nothing more complicated than that." She was quiet for a moment. She had been trained by years of provisional arrangements to look for the catch, the underlying condition, the thing that would be asked for eventually. She looked for it now. She didn't find it. "I want to be clear," he said, "that this is a professional arrangement. You'd have your own room, your own schedule within the parameters of meals, 2 days off per week. If at any point you want to leave, you leave. No obligation beyond notice." Outside, the snow had stopped. The backyard was white and still. A cardinal sat on the fence post near the garden shed, very red against all that white. "Yes," she said. She made the pasta that Friday evening, not the lamb from Benedetti's, which she didn't have the ingredients for, but the other pasta, the one she had learned when she was 19 and working her first real kitchen job. Rigatoni with a slow-cooked tomato sauce, using San Marzano, tomatoes from a can, good olive oil, half a white onion, 2 anchovy fillets dissolved in the oil so that they disappeared entirely, but left behind a depth she thought of as the taste of patience. She added fresh basil at the end. She made garlic bread from the remnant of yesterday's loaf. She set the table in the dining room because Patricia told her the family usually ate in the kitchen, but that it was a Friday, and Fridays, since Sophia died, had been the one night Daniel tried to make something that felt like a proper dinner. Emma ate 2 full bowls and asked for a third. Lily ate her first bowl with methodical focus, then pushed it slightly away and looked at Elena. "This is how my mom made pasta," she said. Not as a compliment, exactly. As information. Something she wanted acknowledged. "Your dad told me she used San Marzano tomatoes," Elena said. "He mentioned it when I was going through the pantry." Lily considered this for a moment. Then she pulled her bowl back and ate the rest. Daniel cleared his throat. He hadn't said much during the meal. He refilled Emma's water glass twice and asked about school and listened to a detailed accounting of a disagreement about playground rules that had apparently divided Emma's first-grade class into 2 opposing factions. He ate everything on his plate. When the girls were in the living room, Elena began clearing the table. Daniel carried plates to the kitchen without being asked. "Thank you," he said. She nodded. She ran hot water over the plates. "Lily doesn't say things like that to just anyone," he said. He was standing near the counter, not helping, not leaving. Just present in the way that she was learning was characteristic of him, quiet, in proximity, not demanding anything. What she said about her mother. She hasn't said her mother's name in a year. Elena kept her eyes on the dishes. She's a remarkable kid. They both are. A pause. "I know I should be more on top of the cooking. I try, but I'm better at things with clear right answers. Cooking is too interpretive." She heard something in that he hadn't meant to offer. Something about the engineering mind's preference for the solvable over the felt. She did not remark on it. "You did fine today," she said. "Your pantry is very well organized." He laughed once, surprised. It was the first time she had heard him laugh. February came in cold and clear. The city plowed the streets. Elena bought herself a proper coat from a thrift store on South Broadway wool, charcoal gray, missing 1 button, which she replaced with a near match from a jar in Patricia's sewing cabinet. She found her rhythm in the house. Up at 6:15, coffee on before the girls came down. School lunches built the night before, so mornings moved smoothly. She kept a running grocery list on the corner of the kitchen whiteboard and restocked without being asked. Lily began sitting at the kitchen counter while Elena cooked dinner. She didn't talk much. She was not, Elena came to understand, a child who talked much in general. But she would sit with a book or her homework, and occasionally she would look up and ask something specific and unexpected. "What is roux, and why does it smell like that before it's done? And is it true that salt makes water boil faster?" Elena answered everything. She told Lily the truth about the salt, which was that it raises the boiling point negligibly, and mostly what it does is make the pasta taste better. And Lily nodded as though filing this information under a heading she had designated for things that were technically not what they seemed but were still useful. Emma, meanwhile, drafted Elena into an ongoing theatrical production concerning a family of dolphins, a drama that seemed to have been running in some form for most of Emma's sentient life and that accepted new cast members without audition. Elena played, variously, a marine biologist, a deep-sea explorer, and on one occasion the ocean itself, which required a great deal of interpretive movement and which, when Daniel passed the living room doorway and saw it, produced the second laugh Elena had heard from him. He was careful with her. She recognized the carefulness, because she was careful with him in exactly the same way, both of them holding the arrangement like something that might break if handled thoughtlessly, moving around each other with a consideration that could have been professionalism but that, over time, began to feel like something else. She noticed the things he left. A good cutting board appeared on the counter one morning. A bottle of better olive oil replaced the store brand, a small speaker for the kitchen positioned where she tended to work. He noticed the things she fixed. The cabinet hinge that had been slightly off since she arrived. She tightened it with a screwdriver she found in the utility drawer. The clock in the girls' bathroom that had been 2 minutes fast. She corrected it without comment. The kitchen whiteboard, where she kept the grocery list. and where she had begun, after the first week, to leave small notes, a recipe she was planning, a reminder about Emma's field trip, a weather forecast drawn in simple icons because she had noticed Lily checked the board every morning. One evening in late February, Daniel came home and found Elena asleep on the sofa. She had clearly intended only to sit for a moment. Her book was open across her chest. Her reading glasses, drugstore readers, purchased with her first salary installment, slightly crooked. The living room lamp was on low. The house was quiet. He stood in the hallway for a moment and then went to the kitchen without waking her and made himself a sandwich, which he ate standing at the counter. He was aware that he had not thought of her, in that moment, as an employee. It was a Thursday in March, 2:15 in the morning. Elena woke to the sound of small feet in the hall, not Lily's deliberate tread, but Emma's, urgent and off-rhythm. She was out of bed before she was fully awake. The way she had learned to move in the first weeks in this house, when she was still adjusting to its sounds and its needs. Emma was standing in the hallway outside her door, her face crumpled. "I had a bad dream," Emma said. "A really bad one. Come here." Elena took her back to her room and sat with her on the bed. Emma described the dream in fragments, something about water, something about being very small, something about calling for a person who didn't come. Elena listened without pushing for coherence. She knew enough about the dreams of children who had lost someone to know that the narrative was rarely the point. She said, "I'm going to sing something. It's not a cool song. It's very old." Emma, still trembling slightly. "Okay." Elena sung the lullaby that Mrs. Doyle at Sunridge Group Home had sung to the little ones on difficult nights. Not a famous song, not a song with a name she knew. Just a melody in a minor key about rivers and sleep and morning always coming. She had not sung it in years. It came back without effort, the way the body remembers what the mind forgets. Emma fell asleep before the second verse. Elena sat in the armchair by the window, not wanting to leave until she was sure. Outside, a late winter moon hung over the roofline. She could hear the furnace cycling on and off in the basement. She did not hear Daniel in the doorway. He had come home from a late call with clients in Seattle and had gone to check on the girls the way he always did. The habit so ingrained he did it without thinking, and he had found the hallway light on and Elena's door open, and then found, by following the sound, this scene: his daughter asleep, and Elena in the armchair, with her head resting on one hand, her eyes closed. The lullaby faded to silence. He stood there a long time. Sophia had sung to them, in the early years. He couldn't remember the exact song anymore. That was one of the things grief had taken from him. The specific sounds, but he remembered the shape of it. The soft, irregular rhythm, the way the girls would stop fussing as if the music reached some part of them that was below language. He went back to bed. He lay awake until almost 5, which was unusual for him. He was not someone who lay awake. He was someone who processed things efficiently and slept. He was not entirely sure what was happening. She had known he would come eventually. People like Marcus did not simply accept the revocation of what they considered theirs. It was a Saturday in late March, a bright, hard afternoon with the remnants of snow still white in the shadows of the fence line. Elena was in the backyard with the girls. Emma was attempting to teach Lily a handstand. Lily was declining with good-natured precision when she heard the car horn from the street. She didn't think anything of it. Then she heard her name, Elena. The voice was thick, even from the backyard. She knew that thickness. She went still. Emma and Lily had stopped their game. They were looking at her. "Go inside," Elena said. Her voice came out very level, which surprised her. "Tell Patricia to put on a movie." Lily took Emma's hand. They went. Elena walked through the side gate to the front of the house. Marcus was standing on the sidewalk, 40 feet from the front door. He was wearing his good coat, which meant he had thought about this, which meant he had driven here deliberately, not impulsively. She registered these facts without moving. "Who told you where I was?" she asked. "You posted a photo." Some restaurant supply store. I recognized the street. She had posted one photo 3 weeks ago of a bulk bag of San Marzano tomatoes she had found on sale. She noted the lesson and filed it. "What do you want, Marcus? I want you to come home." She absorbed this. "That's not home." His jaw tightened. "You think you found something better? Playing house with some rich guy in Cherry Creek? Cooking for his kids? I'm not having this conversation with you. You're being absurd." What we had. The front door opened. Daniel stepped onto the porch. He hadn't changed from his morning clothes, old jeans, a gray pullover, and he hadn't hurried, which Elena noticed. He walked down the porch steps and across the front lawn with his hands in his pockets, unhurried, the way a person walks when they're not afraid. He stopped beside Elena. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, which turned out to be its own complete statement. Marcus looked between them. His face moved through several calculations. "This isn't your business," Marcus said. "She's standing on my property," Daniel said. His voice was very quiet. "I just want to talk to my wife, ex-wife, from what I understand." Daniel's tone didn't change. "And she's told you she doesn't want to have this conversation. I'd suggest you respect that, and if I don't," a pause. "Then, very simply, then I call the police, and I have very good lawyers, and we have a conversation about harassment, which will take up considerably more of your time than leaving." It was the specificity, she thought later, that was effective. Not a threat of violence, not a raised voice, just the clear arithmetic of consequence, stated by someone who had plainly done arithmetic like this before. Marcus left. Elena stood on the lawn after the car had turned the corner. She was aware that her hands were shaking, not from fear, exactly, but from the effort of having stood her ground, which still took effort, which she was still learning. She pressed them against her thighs. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked. "Yes." A pause. He looked at the empty street. "If he comes back," Daniel said, "you don't have to handle it yourself." She looked at him. He was not watching her with pity. He was watching her with the steady attention of someone who had said a thing they meant and were waiting to see if it landed. It landed. She nodded once. They walked back inside. April came. Denver thawed slowly, which it always did. You couldn't trust April in Colorado, Patricia said, and then said it again with feeling when 6 inches fell on the 12th, and they all spent the morning making pancakes and watching the snow come down. Lily got sick in the 3rd week of April. Not seriously a fever, a sore throat, the ordinary illness of childhood, but it came on fast, the way fevers in young children do, and it hit on a Thursday when Daniel was in a client meeting in Boulder that he could not easily leave. Elena drove the girls to school in the morning, and Lily had seemed fine. By noon, Patricia was calling from the school nurse's office. Elena picked her up. Lily, in the car, pale and quiet, her forehead warm against Elena's palm. At home, Elena made the ginger tea she'd made for herself during bad weeks, not from a bag, from scratch. With a peeled knob of fresh ginger and honey and a bit of lemon, simmered until the kitchen smelled warm and botanical. She set Lily up in the living room with the weighted blanket from her bed and the book she was currently reading, a chapter book about a girl archaeologist in the 1920s that Lily had been working through with the focused attention she gave to everything. She sat with her through the afternoon, checking her temperature every 40 minutes, replacing the cool cloth when it warmed. She read aloud when Lily asked her to 3 chapters of the archaeologist book, doing different voices for the different characters, which Lily tolerated without comment, but which also did not ask her to stop. The fever crested at 5 and began to come down at 7. Daniel came home at 8. He came directly to the living room, tie already off, and crouched down beside the sofa where Lily was lying. "Hey, Bug." "Hi, Dad." He put his hand on her forehead. He looked at Elena, who was in the armchair nearby, a cup of tea in her own hands, her reading glasses on. She shook her head slightly. "Nothing serious. She's fine." He exhaled. Lily turned her head on the pillow and looked at Elena and said, very quietly, in the voice of someone who is not fully awake, but is perfectly sincere. "Mom." There was a pause that lasted about half a second, and in that half second the entire room changed. Lily's eyes went briefly wide, the recognition, the correction rising in her, and Elena watched her and said, softly, before Lily could apologize, "I'm here, Lily. Go to sleep." Lily closed her eyes. Elena looked at the wall. She was aware of Daniel in the room, and she did not look at him yet, because she was waiting for her face to return to neutral, which it was taking a moment to do. When she finally looked, he was still watching Lily. He did not comment on what had happened, and she understood that this was the right choice, that it was the kind of thing that needed to be held quietly for now, not spoken about, allowed simply to exist. Patricia found Elena in the kitchen later, washing the ginger pan. "You've been here 4 months, Patricia said. "About that, I want you to know that I was skeptical when he brought you home." She stood near the doorway with her characteristic directness, the kind of directness that Elena had initially read as coldness, but had come to understand was simply the communication style of someone who didn't have patience for indirection. "I've been with this family for 3 years. I loved Sophia very much. I was protective." "I understand," Elena said. "You're not her," Patricia said. "You're not trying to be." "I see that." She paused. "What I see is someone who shows up, who pays attention, who has made my job considerably less impossible." Elena waited. "The girls trust you," Patricia said. "That's not given easily, not by either of them." She straightened her cardigan. "I thought you should know that I've changed my assessment." She went back down the hall. Elena turned back to the sink. The city outside the kitchen window was soft with evening, the street lamps coming on, the last light going blue over the mountains. It was a morning in early May, the kind of morning that makes Denver feel like a promise kept clear and still, and cold enough to see your breath, but warm enough that the front door could stand open for a minute. Elena was in the kitchen at 6:40. The coffee made, the lunches built and in their boxes on the counter. She was cutting fruit for breakfast, strawberries, a mango, the season finally permitting something that tasted like more than storage, when she heard footsteps in the hall. Not the girl's footsteps, Daniel's. He came in and poured his coffee and stood at the counter and looked out the window at the backyard. The garden was starting. She had planted herbs in the raised bed last week, basil and thyme and a rosemary cutting she'd propagated from the one in the south window, and you couldn't see them yet, but they were down there, doing their underground work. On the counter, between the cutting board and the coffee maker, there was a small glass jar. Inside it, a single wildflower. Small, yellow-white, with a thin stem. The kind of thing that grew at the margins of walking paths. The kind of flower that was not technically a flower but was so persistent and unbothered by its own insignificance that it may as well have been. There was no note. She had found it there when she came downstairs, and she had known without explanation where it came from. She knew his communication style by now: the cutting board, the olive oil, the speaker, the quiet improvements, the small, reliable signals of a person who would rather demonstrate than declare. She hadn't moved it. She'd put it near the window where it would have light. Daniel noticed her noticing it. He looked at the jar for a moment, then back out the window. "The rosemary is doing well," he said. "It needs another week," she said. "That seems about right." Upstairs, the sound of 2 children waking Emma's voice already in full deployment, Lily's quieter response. The familiar percussion of a morning assembling itself. Elena set the fruit on the table. Daniel refilled his coffee. Lily appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her hair uncombed, her book already in her hand. Emma appeared behind her, still adjusting her uniform, asking a question about dolphins that appeared to have begun before she had fully reached consciousness. Elena answered the dolphin question. She helped with the collar. She handed Lily a comb without being asked. She was 27 years old. She had been married to a man who could not love what she could not provide him. She could not carry a child. She had been told, in various ways and at various times throughout her life, that she was insufficient, not enough, not complete, not what was needed. She stood in the kitchen of a house on Bellevue Avenue, in Denver, in May, watching two small girls eat breakfast in the morning light. And she thought, this is what belonging feels like, not the loud kind, not the kind that announces itself, the quiet kind, the kind that grows slowly, that looks like a pot of soup simmering on the stove. That sounds like a child saying your name in the dark without fear, that feels like standing somewhere and knowing, simply, without drama or declaration, I am not a visitor here. She poured coffee for herself. She sat down at the table. Emma immediately leaned over to show her a drawing of a dolphin with what appeared to be a briefcase. Lily pushed the strawberries to her preferred side of the bowl without asking, and Elena let her. From the doorway, Daniel watched the table his daughters. This woman, the ordinary golden light of a morning that had not been asked for and could not have been planned, and he let himself feel, quietly and without apology, that this was good, that this was enough. That some things find their shape not by design, but by persistence, by a person choosing, again and again, to stay.